Hi, Allie. How are you? We're
I'm
going to get
good.
ready. I'm good. I'm good. We're going to get started in a few minutes, okay?
Okay, great.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. As you sign on, it's great to see many familiar faces. We're going to get started in a few minutes. I would just ask of all the attendees to keep yourselves on mute, please, just to limit the background noise. And we are recording this meeting, which is necessary for the next steps that we're doing with the City of Philadelphia. So I just wanted to notify you that this meeting is being recorded. And we will get started shortly. All right, everyone, we're going to get started in just 1 minute. Just a couple of housekeeping details before we get started. I did want to inform you that this meeting is being recorded. I also wanted to let you know that in WebEx, there are a few features that we can use tonight as we facilitate this meeting. One of them is the chat box, which appears in the lower left-hand corner. It's like a bubble. So if you have questions or comments, you can enter those into the chat box. We also have a raise hand feature, which looks like a hand. And if you have questions, you're welcome to put them there through the raised hand feature or in the chat box. And we'll circle back to you at the point in the agenda where we're going to move to questions and answers. And I wanted to make sure that everyone can see my screen. Can someone audibly say that they can see it? That would help me.
Black screen right now or a blank screen right now. I see your mouse moving.
Okay, thank you. I'm having a little trouble with WebEx. One moment, please. Karen,
Yeah.
are you able, as in your facilitator role, to share your screen with the PowerPoint, please?
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so as we just finished our final housekeeping detail, I want to introduce myself and welcome all of you. I'm Jen Weichert. I'm the Executive Director of Covenant House, Pennsylvania. I'm sitting tonight in Philadelphia in our emergency shelter location in Germantown. I have been in my role for just about 2 years. I started in January of 2020. And so that did impact my ability to meet many of you in person because of the pandemic. But I'm happy that some of the pandemic restrictions have been lifted just this week and that we're facing some different circumstances related to COVID. So I look forward this spring and summer to getting out more and to being able to meet with many of you in person. So tonight, I have the pleasure of sharing with you some updates or in many cases, new information about a new project that Covenant House Pennsylvania is taking on in order to fulfill our mission. And if you're not familiar with Covenant House, we are part of, at this point, an international federation that is working to support young adults who are experiencing homelessness. And our strategy is to provide housing, shelter, all the kind of basic needs, supports that someone would need to move beyond being homeless, but also to provide sort of a network of supportive services so that young people, young adults who are experiencing homelessness beyond shelter also have the support they need to become independent and healthy adults. And so tonight we're going to talk about a new project that Covenant House has had underway for some time that we want to bring across the finish line in the coming months. And we wanted to make sure that we again shared news with our community members in Germantown and across the Covenant House community of stakeholders about this project and hear your questions and thoughts as well. And we'll get into that later in the meeting. So again, just a reminder that we are recording the meeting. You can use the chat bubble, which is in the bottom left-hand corner at any point if you wanted to make a comment or question, and you can also use the raise hand feature. So if we could go to the next slide. And Karen, before we enter into this content, I would appreciate if you could play our anchor video to help folks understand a little bit more about our work and our impact.
Okay, sure. 1 second.
Thank you.
At Covenant House, we're working with some of the most vulnerable human beings out there that are ages 16 to 22. My role is to support the organization achieving its mission, which is to help youth overcome homelessness by providing them with shelter and supportive services. Covenant House PA is a statewide organization. We have 3 physical locations, 2 in Philadelphia and 1 in York. In Philadelphia, we offer housing for young people in a shelter context, emergency housing and services, also transitional housing. So those young people who have been stabilized through our shelter and then can live in a more independent setting as they seek permanent housing.
Transitional housing is an independent living model with 24/7 staff support. So we house people in our location in Kensington, section of Philadelphia, and we offer life skills, budgeting, cooking, grocery shopping, pretty much anything that you would need to be independent, so that when you leave Covenant House, you're able to stay in your own apartment or household and never ever have to experience homelessness again.
We also have a street outreach program here in Philadelphia. So specifically, we are out canvassing communities.
We go around the city of Philadelphia in our Covenant House van, and we feed people that are chronically street homeless. We give them hygiene products, clothes, blankets, whatever they need, to offer them a moment of humanity. And if they're in our age range under the age of 21 and they need to come into shelter, we will take them right then and there.
I think a challenge for us on mission delivery is that we now see many of our young people dealing with very serious mental health issues. Everything from depression and anxiety to schizophrenia and psychosis.
It doesn't just help with the surface level stuff. It also helps with your mental health.
When a youth first arrives at shelter, we ask them about any mental health symptoms they have and any former treatment that they've had. Oftentimes what I find is some of their former diagnoses don't really fit into the bigger picture, because I think what we see is the common thread is just a whole lot of really difficult experiences and trauma.
In Philadelphia specifically, we are situated in America's poorest big city. And there is an unbreakable link between poverty, especially inter or multi-generational poverty, and homelessness. We're also in a city that is dealing with a racial reckoning and the consequences of sort of a racial justice movement. And there is an unbreakable link between racism, structural and institutional racism, and homelessness. So at Covenant House, we have to pay attention to the landscape and the times in which we're doing our work. And we recognize until things like institutional racism and poverty can really be addressed as a society, that we will have homelessness continue for young people. So we're focused on both the structural and the service delivery. The staff at Covenant House PA are mission driven, they are dedicated, they are committed.
I love what I do. I love helping people. I love helping somebody find their next walk of life.
Unconditional love and absolute respect, I think, is something that we're very good at. There's plenty of times over the years, and I've been here 10 years, when youth have actually physically ran to one of our locations for safety because they know that we're a safe space. We're not going to judge them. They can tell us anything that happened outside of here, and they're still welcome here with open arms.
Despite all the hardship that they've gone through, their ability to overcome this hardship produces a new level of compassion in these youth that I don't see anywhere else.
Thanks, Karen. And if you could go back to the slideshow, that would be great. And slide 2, please. So Covenant House PA has existed for just over 20 years. We started in a storefront in another part of the city and moved to Germantown about 12 years ago. And in the course of our sort of journey as an organization, we have really thought clearly about our theory of change and kind of why we do this work and how we can always improve our work and grow and stretch ourselves as an organization. Thank you, Karen. And this slide illustrates 2 points that I wanted to make really clear as we move on with tonight's conversation. The first one is to just illustrate the pervasiveness of homelessness for young adults in Philadelphia. So there is something called the PIT count, if you've ever heard of that. It's the point in time count where organizations, agencies like Covenant House and Covenant House from all over Philadelphia will go out for one night and canvass and literally physically count the number of homeless people that they see. And this is how the city of Philadelphia or other municipalities determine kind of who is the need, who is the population, and then also calibrate what are the services that we should have as a city to be able to serve these individuals. So back in 2019, which was kind of the last year when the PIT count data was verified and available. It was pre-COVID. There were 3,373 homeless people counted on that one night in Philadelphia, and it's usually done in late February. Out of those over 3,000 individuals, 286 that were counted were young adults who were the population age at Covenant House, 18 to 24-year-olds. That's about 8% of the homeless population. Other statistics say that it's higher, that you're looking about 10% of the homeless population are young adults. We don't always see this. It doesn't manifest itself like older adult homelessness or chronic homelessness, but it is there. It is pervasive. It crosses all sorts of socioeconomic, racial lines, etc. We know that there are several factors that contribute to young people being homeless. Research shows incomplete education can do it. Also poverty. And in the video, I spoke about Philadelphia being America's poorest big city. And that is certainly still the case. And it's actually been, I think, made worse by COVID. So we know that youth homelessness exists. We know that it's pervasive. And at Covenant House, we've spent a lot of time, as I said, thinking about what are the services and supports and interventions that young people need in order to move from being homeless to being successful, housed adults. And so, Karen, if you can get the PowerPoint back up. WebEx is not always our friend. Well, I'll just talk while you do, but at Covenant House, we have a theory of change, and that is that we want to find young people where they are. That could be on the street, that could be congregating outside of public transit. It might be through law enforcement, through the criminal justice system. It might be at school. We're going to find young people where they are through our outreach program. We're going to share information, resources, and support with them. We're going to help them find a safe place to sleep and get hot meals and other services in our shelter. And then if they choose to, they can enter into longer term housing with us. We have currently transitional housing that's in Kensington. Karen, can you go back one slide, please? Thank you. We have transitional housing in Kensington, which represents the long-term support icon on the slide that's up in front of you. And we've recognized over the years that the 20 beds that we have at that facility in Kensington just aren't enough, that we need more longer-term apartments and other types of housing units for this age group, for this population in Philadelphia in order to move them from being homeless. And so part of what we want to talk with you about tonight is our plans to have new transitional housing units in Germantown and why that's important. Before we do that, I want to highlight a young person from Covenant House whose name is Hector. And Hector, I just saw you a moment ago pop up on my screen. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How about you?
It's great to meet you. We have connected in other ways, but never face-to-face in this format. So Hector, what's your connection to Covenant House? How long have you been connected to the organization?
So back in 2020, I filled out an application and I was I just got back around my biological family. I was adopted. I was taken away at when I was around 6. So I was living with different, like a few family members, and it wasn't working out. It was an toxic environment, you know what I'm saying, that I didn't want to be a part of. Like, and I ended up having issues with certain people I was living with in the house. But I put several different applications to here and another place similar to this, and you guys reached out to me. But I ended up going to a mental facility to get my mental back on track because it was slowly going down. And y'all was trying to reach out to me. But when I got released out of Horsham, I ended up going to the Whosoever Gospel Mission. But on my last day before getting released, they told me that because I got connected with a case manager, they told me about the Covenant House. They said that they feel like that would be appropriate for me to go to. Is more around people my age and more help and this and that. I didn't know that the application I filled out was Covenant House. So when I went to the Whosoever Gospel Mission, I stayed for a day, and I just wasn't feeling it. It was uncomfortable, people not around my age. So the guy let me go to the Covenant House. He said if I didn't like it, that I could come back. But if what I'm saying, so I end up staying at the Covenant House. I stayed there for a month and a half. I had an option to either do this or the Embrace program. I chose this because I felt like I wasn't ready at the time to be on my own. I felt like this would give me the support that I needed. And yeah, everything been good so far.
That's great. And so, Hector, what with Covenant House are you working on? What are your goals for yourself as your next steps?
So I've been working on, as I said when I went to the mental facility, I'm working on getting my mental back in order. I started therapy. I just started this since I came to this. I started therapy. I started seeing the doctor. I started taking my medicine, and I'm working on getting put back on my SSI because I was receiving that when I was younger.
Mm.
And I'm working on
Hector, this is Miss Natalie. You're working on housing as well.
oh yeah, I forgot about that. I'm working on housing. We put in applications and I'm waiting on a call back. I'm waiting on an available bed. That's what I'm waiting on.
Okay. So it sounds like you have a full plate, Hector, that you're trying to tackle and a lot of goals, which is great. Can you talk briefly about the support that you're getting from folks like Miss Natalie and other people at Covenant House to help you right now? What's that support been like for you?
The support been really good. As you can see, I've been on a lot of these mock interviews. And I've just been like getting different information because like on these stuff on the different mock interviews, and there's like a couple I was interested in, and Covenant House just been helping me like doing things that I never knew how to do before. Like for instance, like they've been helping me try to like be more, how you say it, like independent and stuff like that. Like I used to like be very bad with money. I'm still kind of, but not as bad like when I first got here. So
Okay.
I've been like working on that more. I've been working on I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, I got like
Well, it sounds like you're working on a lot of things and you have a lot of goals and you're getting a lot of great support. And that is really wonderful to hear. And it's really admirable how you're taking on some of these challenges and that you're feeling successful. Yes?
yes.
Good. Good. Well, our goal at Covenant House is to help you and help others like you that we haven't even met before. And so I appreciate you sharing your story, Hector, and having a chance to meet more people connected with Covenant House. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Oh, and then
Yes.
I forgot to mention this. Me and Miss
I love
Natalie
your
got this.
smile, by the way, Hector. You have a great smile.
Thank you. Me
You're
and Miss
welcome.
Natalie have this thing where we cook on Thursdays, so we always be cooking, like during like Thanksgiving, Christmas. I'll be helping her cook the different stuff, and then we will cook like every week. So we've been doing like our own little cooking class.
Well, what is your favorite recipe? I'm feeling like I need a new recipe in my arsenal. What would you recommend I make?
Well, Miss Natalie makes the best yams. Candy yams.
Oh, got it. Okay. Well, I'll have to get a recipe from the two of you and figure that out. Well, Hector, it was great to have you join us tonight. You're welcome to stay on or hop off, whatever you need to do, but thank you for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, so I'm glad we had a chance to meet Hector, who is receiving really important services from Covenant House. And as I said, we want to be able to help more youth like Hector work on their goals and have the stability of housing behind them to do it. So if we could go to the next slide. So Covenant House has had a transitional housing program in Philadelphia for many years. And I just want to read to you some data that sort of verifies and validates our approach to transitional housing with young people. So in one of the most comprehensive analyses ever undertaken on transitional housing outcomes for youth, Covenant House International, for which Covenant House PA is part, found that among 564 young people who exited transitional housing in the US, that 73% exited the program into stable housing, and 69% were employed or enrolled in school when they left the program. So Hector just spoke about his goal of independence, and so that is the same goal that we bring to all of our work with young people, is that in their time at Covenant House, yes, we're providing them housing, but we're also helping them figure out their path forward. So I wanted to make sure that we showcase this data point. So if Karen, if you could move to the next slide, please. So in thinking about how we could serve more young people like Hector, all the way back in 2016, my predecessor, John Dukoff, brought to the community in Covenant House the idea that we should increase the number of transitional housing beds that we have in the Covenant House Pennsylvania portfolio. And we should do that in Germantown in order to create a campus for Covenant House. So if you look at the slide, the picture on the left is a building that's located on Germantown Avenue in the 5000 block. That was the former site of Asher's Chocolate Factory and has been several businesses since. It was vacant, and the determination was that if we were to acquire the building, that we could almost create a Covenant House campus in Germantown. So if you look at the slide on the right of your screen, you'll see the new building indicated, and then the existing Covenant House shelter location where I'm sitting tonight. So they sort of are back to back. And it's the block of Woodlawn, Armont, and Germantown that I'm talking about. So the building was acquired with the help of generous donors back in 2018. And a project was started soon after to assess how we would take this historic building and transform it into transitional housing units. It was determined that we would do a full rehabilitation of the building. We would also add some additional square footage to the building to maximize the number of units. And that on the ground floor, which you can see, the picture is a little grainy, but it's almost a storefront type of feel. That on the ground floor, we would use that as office space for Covenant House, and then also programming space so that young people could meet with staff, they could gather, they could have workspaces, etc. So in 2019, before I joined the organization, the budget for this project was somewhere around $3 million. We were starting to fundraise, and we were beginning to establish a rhythm in terms of raising money and building awareness about this project. Karen, if we could go to the next slide. And if you flash forward, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about sort of where we are today in the course of the next two slides. So this project that is specifically located at 5603 to 5605 Germantown Avenue, it meets a well-documented community need for more housing paired with supportive services for young people ages 18 to 24 experiencing homelessness. It also helps to advance a very important goal for this organization, which is to have a continuum of housing. So yes, to meet a young person, as I said, on the street, help them come into shelter to be safe and stabilized, and then help them find a next step of housing and have that kind of continuum available to as many young people as possible. This project also builds on Covenant House PA's successful track record of delivering this type of housing in Philadelphia. As I said earlier, the project is a rehabilitation of an existing historic structure in Germantown that will eventually lead to the creation of a campus for Covenant House. The building will contain 12 units of housing for young adults and young families. The housing will be 3 one-bedroom units. One is ADA compliant, and then 9 efficiencies. And on the ground floor, there will be dedicated programming space, as I said, and also dedicated office space for Covenant House. And if you could advance to the next slide. So the budget started at under 3. The budget has crept up. We're all dealing with inflation, supply chain issues, and labor shortages. So the budget currently is at $3.2 million. Our generous community of Covenant House supporters has very much stepped up. And these are some of the major sources of support from both the private and public sector that we have been able to secure commitments from and dollars so far. We have gone through a rigorous approval process with the Philadelphia Historical Commission since that building was deemed historic. We have applied for building permits, and if anyone's ever done work with L&I, you know that isn't always a straight shot trajectory. It takes time. So we're waiting on the approvals. And we're also preparing an application right now for the City of Philadelphia, their Neighborhood Preservation Initiative. That application is due next week, and we hope that that would provide us enough funds to close the gap for this project, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 to $800,000. The reason I say neighborhood is the price fluctuations in materials, labor, etc., don't allow us to shoot, a target on any given day regarding how much the gap is, but it's somewhere in that $700,000 to $800,000 range. So we have some of the generous supporters on the line tonight, so I'll just thank them and thank the entire Covenant House community for their support of this project, as well as numerous elected officials, the city's Office of Homeless Services, some state and federal agencies, and also Senator Bob Casey, who has very much supported this project and has also explored ways that we could tap into federal funding to help close our gap and get the project up and running. So with that said, I wanted to turn it over to all of you and see what questions you have. With me tonight is my colleague Karen Cobham, who is the Director of Development at Covenant House, Natalie Proud, who leads our transitional housing work, and also Allie Moorhead, who is from Sherrick Project Management, who has been working in tandem with me on this project as we were trying to get it off the ground. So I'm happy to open up to questions. I'm going to close, I'm going to open my chat box so I can see if anybody's posted anything. And I will adjust my layout so I can see if anyone has raised their hand. And we don't have to only have questions. If you have a comment, an endorsement, you are welcome to share that at this point as well. So Alyssa White, who was on the call, said that she had to go, but she's thrilled to hear about the progress, such a big need, and so much effort to get there. So thank you so much for that feedback. So Allie, I did not include this in the presentation, but do you want to talk kind of about the square footage and any of the other kind of macro level details that you think, or micro, in fact, too, that you think it might be important for the meeting participants to know about the
Sure.
project? Thank you.
Yeah. So I think something that's really interesting about this project is it was already zoned for mixed use, but it was never used for mixed. It was never used as residential upstairs as it was meant to be. So without having to change the building so much, it's going to look very similar. It's still going to have the characteristics of, that it has, and you're going to add these 12 units of housing without even changing this beautiful building on a commercial corridor. So I think that's a great part of the project. The building is currently 12,230 square feet. And then we're adding an addition to the third floor in the middle section of the building. So it won't even make a difference where you view it on Germantown Ave. You'll only see this along the side of Woodlawn. And that'll be on the third floor, and it'll make the building 13,320 square feet. So it's a small addition, but it'll make possible for 12 units. And then there'll also be some windows added to the side of the building that'll kind of go along with the look of the rest of the building. They won't look too different, as the Historical Commission has worked with us on. And there'll be an entrance on the side. So I also think it's great that there won't be a ton of commotion at the front of the building, but you'll have added all this other life to the building that's been sitting there vacant. There'll be elevators, so the units will be accessible to all, there's only one ADA unit, but any of the units are accessible by elevator. And then the downstairs will obviously, the ground floor has the office space and program space. So it worked out really great and being right next door, right adjacent to the back of the crisis center. So I think it'll work out really well and still look like the building that was there before.
And Allie, you and I talked about a construction timeline of approximately a year, which we think is probably a safe bet given all the variables in the world, right?
Unfortunately, yes. Originally, we thought 9 months, since it's technically an existing building and we're mostly just doing the interior. But because of the world right now and supply shortages, we think it's safer to say 12 months. And we hope to start construction this summer. That's our goal.
So I see who's on the call, and I'm wondering if I can rely on anyone to ask a question, to get the question and answer part of the night going. Anyone have a question that they wanted to pose?
Hey Jen, it's Bridget from CHI. We are so excited for you all to be expanding your programs and can't wait to see what it looks like. Can you tell me a little bit more about which programs exactly you'll have operating out of the new site versus what will perhaps stay, or what's going on in the crisis shelter, and is there any distinction?
Sure. So our crisis shelter emergency, however you want to phrase that, there will be no changes there. That will continue to move forward. It's a very important resource for young people to have in this community and in Philadelphia overall. Right now, our shelter, our capacity has and unfortunately continues to be, our census, I should say, continues to be a bit lower than the number of beds we have. We've definitely seen that as a trend in these COVID times. So I'm hoping as some restrictions are lifted and, vaccines continue and the world kind of levels out a bit, that we'll see more young people coming into shelter. I know that there were concerns in many shelters across the country, including here in Philadelphia, about being in a congregate care setting during a pandemic. So I'm looking forward to the time where we have more young people in the shelter. As for the new adjacent building, that will be housing in a longer term capacity. So not emergency shelter, but some sort of longer term housing. You could call it transitional, you might call it rapid. I think for us, it will depend on how we're getting referrals for those beds. They might come from the shelter, so individuals that are ready to make the next step. It could come from our partnerships with the City of Philadelphia that often provides referrals to us. And I think also what's notable is that those units in the new building could also be used for young families. And that is a need that we consistently see. It's primarily young moms with young children. So it could be newborns, infants, toddlers. In some of her existing work, our colleague Natalie is serving a growing number of families. And we recognize that that's a really important segment of this population. So Bridget, it's sort of however the referrals come in, it will be people that are seeking longer term housing in their journey from homelessness to permanent housing.
Thank you so much, Jen. Perhaps I misunderstood. I thought because you guys are going to be on the street level, have that storefront, there some of the actual programming outside of housing, perhaps workforce development, education, are any of those programs moving over?
So I think what we want to do on that ground floor is sort of layer in the supports that Covenant House has already seen success in. So that could be workforce development work. It could be parenting programs. It could be places where partners are coming in, to host a job fair or deliver content. So I use the word flexible there because I think we want that program space to really be a hive for whoever, for whatever services the youth in the building need at the time. And I think we have seen that in our existing transitional housing program, where if there was a need or an interest, we would try to bring that in and deliver that content to the young people that were there. So I'm sorry I misunderstood your question, but I think we're going to try to have a full kind of constellation of programming that's emanating out of that ground floor space.
Wonderful, and excited to see that you guys have flexibility to build out what's needed. So congrats.
Yes, thank you. And I think the original plans pre-COVID, the ground floor space had a lot of walls. And I think that we have learned during the pandemic to use our space in a more flexible way in our existing buildings. And so we don't want to build up a lot of walls. We want to have kind of a very open floor plan so that we can be flexible depending on the needs that we have.
Hey, Jen, this is Jim Conley. Just a quick question for you. How will this facility impact or interact with your ROP facility you already have in Kensington in terms of placement, in terms of duration of stay? Just how will the two sites work together?
I think that they will complement one another because it'll be youth that are on a similar kind of segment of their housing journey. It provides us additional beds, additional places in which this segment of the population can go. It may be better for some people to be in Germantown based on their work, childcare, or other circumstances, whereas some people might choose to go to Kensington for their own situation. So I see those two buildings as complementing each other. And I see the existing work that we've done in Kensington as a model with a lot of best practices baked into it that we can replicate in this new facility in Germantown. So we do have a track record around how to stand a program up in a new building. Plus, I think we've also learned a lot during the pandemic that will inform some of the choices and programming that we do. All right, folks, so I want to be mindful of time. How about we take one more question from the participants? Anyone else have a question for us or any feedback that they want to share? Well, with that, I want to thank all of you for joining. Based on the names on the screen I can see, we have a great representation tonight of Covenant House Pennsylvania Board, Covenant House Pennsylvania donors, Covenant House Pennsylvania volunteers, Covenant House Pennsylvania staff, and then some other, connected community members. So I'm glad that we could all come together tonight to reflect on where we are on this project. And I look forward to joining back with you soon when we put shovels in the ground to start construction, and then ultimately celebrating on the day when this project is finished and young people are moving in. So thank you so much for your time. I will stay on if you want to talk more. Otherwise, I wish you a great evening and a happy spring in a few weeks. Take care and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for all your efforts.
Thanks, Ellie. Good to see you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.